everybody. It is Tuesday, November 19th, here on the Mo News Podcast. I'm Moshe Wanunu.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. I want to wish all of you and us here at Mo News a happy National Entrepreneurship Day. It's actually Entrepreneurship Month here in America. The press release last month from the White House, entrepreneurs embody the essence of America. Their ideas and energy have always kept our country on the cutting edge, and their determination and drive uplift communities, create millions of jobs, and keep our nation moving forward. This month, we celebrate their unstoppable spirit. Jill will actually have an announcement later this week regarding Small Business Saturday, which happens after Black Friday. We here at Mo News are here to support all of you, but nonetheless, Jill, from one entrepreneur to another, happy National Entrepreneurship Day.
For basically everybody who doesn't watch this on YouTube, I'm giving myself a nice pat on the back. Good for us, Moshe. We embody the American spirit.
We embody the essence of America, and we keep the country on the cutting edge. Jill, I grew up, my dad had a small business. My parents ran a cabinet shop. He had a construction company before that. My brother's had his own small business. My wife has her own small business. And obviously there's risks and challenges associated with it, but it is incredibly satisfying. And these days between eBay, Amazon, Etsy, so many opportunities, even if you're not building your entire business, but you're doing a small little side project. Kudos to all of you out there. We appreciate all of you.
I know a lot of moms actually who took a hiatus from work when they started to have kids and who have since started their own side hustles that have become pretty big businesses thanks to Etsy and some of those other websites, or even just doing it direct to consumer.
Yeah, it's you start by just taking a hobby or something you love or something you're really good at, and then you realize, hey, there's a market for this. And so again, even if you do it just for fun, as opposed to for revenue purposes, or if you don't at all, if you're not an entrepreneur and you work for one of those major big companies out there, a reminder today to support the entrepreneur in your life.
All right, now to the news. We start with politics. Donald Trump makes it clear he is focused on starting his mass deportation plan on day one with an executive order to call on the military for support domestically. And we bring you an update on whether that ethics report about Trump's pick for Attorney General, Matt Gaetz, will be released after years of investigation over sexual misconduct allegations and illicit drug use. Plus, the backstory of two unlikely media guests at Trump's Mar-A-Lago home after years of bad blood.
And which former cast member of The Real World is been nominated for one cabinet slot, Jill?
As long as you didn't say which cast member of The Apprentice. Which, it's not too late. It could happen.
Both reality shows have potential nominees.
An E. Coli outbreak connected to carrots at major grocery chains. Which ones are affected? Why some users are leaving Elon Musk's X for a different social media app. In medical news, a surgery to change your eye color is growing in popularity, but not approved by many doctors.
I don't know if I'm going to mess with this one, Jill.
If things go wrong, it just doesn't seem like it's worth it.
It's
like
a lot
the
of
risk reward.
Vision is a lot. Yeah, messing with your vision is a lot of risk.
And AI chatbots outperform doctors when it comes to diagnosing illnesses. And we reveal the best restaurants of 2024 from Infatuation, plus some dining trends to look forward to next year. And Moshe is on this day in history.
A new way to read books entered the mainstream on this day in history.
Okay, we start with an update on Donald Trump's most controversial cabinet pick. Former Representative Matt Gaetz from Florida tapped for Attorney General. The House Ethics Committee will meet tomorrow to talk about whether or not they plan to release the results of that multi-year investigation into Gaetz, including sexual misconduct involving a 17-year-old, illicit drug use, attending sex parties, and accepting improper gifts. Gaetz has denied all of these allegations. The bipartisan House Ethics Committee has been investigating Gaetz on and off since 2021. Lawmakers were set to release the findings of their probe last week. The investigation continued under the Republican majority, given the seriousness of the allegations. That is, until Gaetz resigned from Congress last week when Trump announced him for AG. It appears his resignation was strategically timed to prevent the release of the report, since he is technically no longer a member of Congress. Some Republican senators, though, are asking the committee to release their findings anyway, ahead of Gaetz's confirmation hearing for Attorney General. But over the weekend, House Speaker Mike Johnson said he's against the idea. He said he doesn't think it's appropriate to release the results of the probe since Gaetz is no longer a member of the House. Johnson says doing so would open up a, quote, Pandora's box. Here is Johnson talking to Jake Tapper on CNN.
My understanding is that the report is not finished. It's in a rough draft form, was not yet ready to be released. And since Matt Gaetz left the Congress, I don't think it's appropriate to do so.
So while there is technically precedent here, there has been a couple examples in history, in recent history, in 1987 and 1990, where the Ethics Committee did release reports on former members. In one case, it was a Democrat. In one case, it was a Republican. Though Speaker Johnson says those were breaches of tradition under extraordinary circumstances, and he does not believe the Gaetz probe meets the criteria. But again, as you mentioned, Republican senators here demanding the investigation results. They don't believe that it should be released to the public, but they want to see a private copy of the report. Remember, Republicans in Congress thought this was serious enough to investigate for multiple years. Kevin McCarthy effectively lost his speakership over it. Gaetz said, I'm going to take you down if you don't stop this ethics investigation. And he subsequently did. Kevin McCarthy standing by this ethics investigation, given just the nature of these allegations against Gaetz. Up to 30 Republican senators, we told you yesterday, privately have said that they don't believe Gaetz is qualified to lead the Justice Department. He has no prosecutorial experience. He has no law enforcement experience. He has no management experience. He has no counterterrorism experience. Just 2 years as a local lawyer before moving on to Congress. And there's all of that on top of the personality issues. He is in basically a fight with the majority of his fellow Republican colleagues in Congress. And then the fact that he's a fierce partisan, he's a loyalist, and there's a belief that he will not be independent and not follow the recent traditions of the Justice Department, where the Attorney General is not meant to just do whatever the president says. This is sort of the post-Nixon situation, the belief that the Justice Department shouldn't be used for the purposes of the sitting president. That's something Nixon did. They then did some reforms, and there's a concern that Gaetz, in addition to the other issues here, would bring it back to the Nixon era. And then there's a larger thing here, Jill, since some people are asking, well, isn't it innocent till proven guilty? For many folks on Capitol Hill, it's not just whether you committed a crime or not, it's the appearance of a crime. It looks like the DOJ didn't pursue charges there because they didn't have enough to criminally convict him. But of course, there's lower standards there, whether it's civil, etc. And again, just the concern that he was potentially going to sex parties here, sex trafficking women under the age of 18 while they were in high school, while he was a sitting member of Congress. A lawyer for the women here speaking out yesterday at ABC News, saying that Gaetz paid 2 of the women via Venmo to have sex with him. Gaetz, incidentally, it appears, did that via Venmo to another man who was subsequently sent to prison for 10 years, this guy Joel Greenberg. He was sent to prison for sex trafficking. It looks like Gaetz, who was a buddy of his, paid via him. Nonetheless, Gaetz denies the charges. DOJ did not pursue them, but the House Ethics Committee has continued to investigate all of this. President-elect Trump standing by Matt Gaetz here, and they fully expect that a Republican Senate, a Republican majority Senate, will stand in line with the president here and give him the attorney general that he wants. So we'll continue to be on Gaetz watch here this week and in the coming weeks, in particular that meeting of the House Ethics Committee in the next day. It has just a slight majority of Republicans on the committee, so they basically need a Republican to join the Democrats there to vote to release. Unclear whether that will happen. In the meantime, Trump continues to name his cabinet picks. This is a much less controversial choice, at least as of this recording. Former Wisconsin Congressman Sean Duffy has been selected to be the next Secretary of Transportation. That's a slot that Pete Buttigieg has had in the Biden administration. Duffy was a congressman from Wisconsin between 2011 and 2019. Fun fact, Duffy appeared on The Real World Boston and Road Rules All-Stars back in 1998. That's where he met his future wife, Rachel Campos Duffy. They now have 9 children. Each of them have Fox News shows. Rachel Campos Duffy has a show, and then Sean Duffy's over on the Fox Business Network. 9 kids. But Jill, Real World Boston, I remember watching The Real World's, sort of an addict there in the 90s. You had New York, you had LA, you had Boston there. I remember watching through Tech Money, Real World Hawaii, and then I sort of fell off the Real World train. Do you ever watch any of those?
I think I watched the first season. I never really got into it, but it was kind of like the first reality show.
Yeah, they had a motto: when people stop being polite and start getting real.
Yeah. Exactly.
And one of the most notable ones there for Gen Xers and elder millennials was the San Francisco season, where you had Pedro and Puck. Don't put your finger in the peanut butter. I think
I don't know.
Remember that?
I don't know, but 30 years later, I'm still watching Housewives, where I think that same motto applies, where people stop being polite and start getting real. Meanwhile, one of Donald Trump's first priorities when he takes office will be immigration and launching a mass deportation of undocumented migrants. It's something he talked about a lot during the campaign. And yesterday, he confirmed all of this on his social media platform, Truth Social. So he was responding to a conservative activist who reported that Trump's administration was preparing to declare a national emergency using military assets to execute what he has called the largest mass deportation of undocumented immigrants in history. Trump's reply, all caps, true, with 3 exclamation points. Again, this is a plan that the president-elect hatched on the campaign trail. Declaring a national emergency would trigger powers that would allow him to use the resources of the U.S. military to help deport millions of people. Trump's transition team has reportedly been working hard to craft this executive order and others like it in a way that would allow them to withstand legal challenges. You'll remember the legal defeat that Trump experienced during his 2017 Muslim ban after taking office. So he doesn't want to repeat that. It doesn't mean that he won't face logistical challenges with the mass deportation plan, things like overcrowded detention centers and just navigating the immigration court backlog.
When it comes to declaring a national emergency, it's something, I think we have 82 national emergencies right now, Jill. It's a tool that presidents have used, including former President Trump. He declared a national emergency on the southern border during his first term in office. Since then, Biden has declared a number of national emergencies specific to Russia, to Afghanistan, the illicit drug trade. So it's one of the tools that presidents like to use. And Trump is hoping that declaring a national emergency here will be one of the ways that he'll be able to use military assets in order to expedite and deport in much larger numbers than he was able to the first go around. This is no surprise that immigration is a big priority for him. The national emergency will be among the things that he is doing alongside some of the folks that he's chosen for his cabinet. That includes South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem, who's been chosen for Homeland Security. We'll have to go through hearings. You also have former ICE Director Tom Homan, who we talked about last week on the pod. He's the border czar. He was on Fox News yesterday talking about Trump's team's plans for after Inauguration Day, saying he's going to Mar-a-Lago soon to finalize their game plan. They have a lot of executive orders ready to roll out upon him taking the oath of office there just after noon on January 20th. They say they're going to take the handcuffs off of immigration and customs enforcement. Now, the thing is, in regards to deportation, it requires lots of judges, logistics, facilities, planes, and there's a limited amount right now in the federal government. They need the help of local authorities, but local authorities might not have that support available and might not cooperate. You're hearing from the mayor of Boston, the governor of Illinois, the governor of California, a number of the blue states who are saying we're not going to cooperate with the federal government, especially when it comes to trying to deport people who aren't criminals in this country. And so declaring this national emergency opens up military assets. What does the military have? Bases, facilities, money. And when you declare a national emergency, that gives the president authority to reallocate funds. So while Congress controls what they call the purse, allocates funds, saying the Defense Department will spend it on X, Y, and Z, declaring a national emergency allows the president ostensibly to go in there and saying, I know that this $100 million or $1 billion is supposed to go towards this. I'm going to take that and move it over to this. And so ultimately what you have here is likely legal cases and lawsuits that we'll see here. Just as the president-elect is preparing, you have groups like the ACLU, Democratic governors, others who are preparing to sue him over all of this. Of course, Trump is also intent on building the wall here, and a number of other policies when it comes to dealing with illegal immigration. One of the things they say, by the way, is that he might not be able to deport everyone, but this language, this preparation, he's trying to send a message to anyone trying to cross the border or anyone already here. You might want to go home at this point, or you might not want to cross the border. And part of this is rhetorical, the feeling that during the Biden administration that they basically gave the sense to people coming across the border that they weren't really going to do anything about them. Trump is trying to send the opposite message. And so that's a bit of these headlines that are coming out. It's unclear all of it and what of it he'll be able to get done. But a bit of it is also meant to just make his job easier by having less folks cross the border. Of course, this effort has been criticized, including by folks in the media. Trump, in turn, calls them fake news. But we did get an interesting development yesterday, Jill, when it comes to one of the more contentious relationships Trump has had with a couple of media personalities of late.
Yeah, Mar-A-Lago hosted two very unlikely guests on Friday, Mika Brzezinski and Joe Scarborough from Morning Joe. The MSNBC host said that they had reached out to Trump for an interview after hearing from many political leaders and citizens who were deeply dismayed about Trump's cabinet selections. So Trump met with them Friday morning at Mar-a-Lago. Joe Scarborough saying they didn't see eye to eye on many of the issues, but agreed to reopen communications. Trump called the meeting cordial and said it ended in a very positive manner, with the group agreeing to speak again in the future. The last time that the anchors met with Trump, 7 years ago, Trump has quite a volatile on-again, off-again relationship with Joe and Mika. So they used to be friends until 2016 when Trump was elected president. Then Joe and Mika turned into fierce critics of him during his first term in office. And in turn, he slammed them on social media and in speeches. In 2017, Trump called Mika low IQ crazy in a tweet. And in another tweet, he called Joe a psycho. And Mika and Joe have also used their fair share of strong language against Trump.
They have, Jill. Let's take a listen to a bit of what Mika and Joe have been saying about Trump over the course of the campaign.
This is not a reach. I could go back and talk about Nazi Germany, and I do it without any concerns whatsoever. And if people can't start drawing the parallels, well, you're just stupid, or you have your head in the sand, or you're one of them.
As Trump's fascism is the lead story every day, his cozying up to dictators, his obsession with Hitler that has now come out, what he has said about our veterans.
So not surprisingly on MSNBC, comparing Trump to the beginnings of Nazi Germany there, but Trump still willing to meet with them. Jill, they used to be so close that Trump offered to conduct their wedding ceremony. Joe and Mika, as they began the show, were married to other folks. They eventually get divorced. They have since gotten married. And around 2016, 2017, they had lunch with then newly elected President Trump. And he's like, why don't you just have your wedding at the White House? And Jared Kushner's like, yeah, I'll conduct it. And Trump's like, no, I'll conduct it. But of course, the relationship fell apart pretty quickly thereafter. And so they got married, not involving Donald Trump, not involving the White House. Nonetheless, there is a lot of pushback on Mika and Joe from the MSNBC audience being like, how could you meet with President-elect Trump here? Here's a bit of what Mika's response was to that as they talked about this meeting yesterday on Morning Joe.
And for those asking why we would go speak to the president-elect during such fraught times, especially between us, I guess I would ask back, why wouldn't we?
Clearly trying to extend an olive branch here. Jill, Trump also did an interview with Fox yesterday where he said, I'm all about free press and the media plays a very important role in our society, which is stark contrast from some of the things he was saying on the campaign trail and what he says on social media typically. So it's interesting here. It comes as there's a larger discussion, and it's one that I know we've been very interested in terms of how the media is going to cover Trump 2 here, the next administration, especially after the first time around where a lot of the media treated every single thing Trump did as DEFCON 1. Everything on a 1 to 10 scale was an 11. And so there was so much outrage out there. It led to people not really being able to distinguish between something that was actually important and something that was just, new or different or said in a different way. So ultimately, I think you saw a lot of the public become numb to this. It's one of the reasons why some of the Harris messaging fell on deaf ears over the campaign trail, which is, he's out for this and he's out for that. And the feeling among the public was like, well, we feel like everything he, did is terrible. And we don't remember everything being terrible. So, ultimately, I don't know if I believe you on this one. And so it's interesting to see the media here, at least in particular, Joe and Mika, go down there from a network that basically spends all day criticizing Trump. And then, of course, you got Fox on the opposite end of the spectrum. And so will this, will the media take a slightly different approach? Remember last time you had the Washington Post declare its motto was democracy dies in the darkness, and this whole push about the opposition press against Trump. How will they approach it this go around? And it does come as there's a discussion within the Democratic Party, about what they should do and how they should approach it. Do they need to try to be a friendlier party to Trump and try to get things done and work across the aisle? Or do they need to stand in opposition to every single thing Trump does like last time? What is the most effective strategy for them as they also try to figure out how can they win back the House and the Senate in 2 years? And then how can they win back the White House in 4 years here? So I think there's a lot of discussion there. And it'll be very interesting to watch sort of the tack that the CNN takes, the tack that the New York Times takes, the Washington Post, and other media outlets as Trump is set to take over here in just about 2 months.
To your point of the media basically acting like everything's an 11 on a scale of 1 to 10 for the first Trump administration, most to what you were saying about during the first Trump administration, the media's reaction to anything that Trump did on a scale of 1 to 10 was 11. For everyone who follows me on social media, they know I talk a lot about anti-Semitism, especially in the United States. And one of the things that I try to say, and you and I have talked about this too, is if everything is anti-Semitism, nothing is anti-Semitism. You can't just always scream anti-Semitism about things that maybe aren't so, that it could just be something else behind it.
Right. A criminal may have done something or someone may have said something without any sort of intention, without any specific intention that they're targeting a Jew for hating a Jew.
Yeah, so to that point, it will be very interesting to see the coverage that Trump gets in this second administration.
Right. He does many things that are unprecedented. He has a very unconventional style. He has a very adversarial style. He has there are many words in the English language we can use to describe it. And just because of the way he presents stuff, it tends to trigger folks. And the bottom line is, can the media say, okay, like he is trying to do X, here's some precedent to it. Here is where it's unprecedented. Here is who it could potentially help. Here is who it could potentially hurt, as opposed to sometimes just sort of going to the knee jerk, being like, this is outrageous and totally terrible, without seeing some of the intentionality behind it or what it's a reaction to. Not here to be an apologist or equivocate here. The point being that I think it's important that the media approach Trump and frankly any president with a very critical lens. That's our job, right? It's our job to present things. It's our job to challenge power. It's the position that we're in the media, but also at times, if anything is outrageous or, beyond the pale, present it as such, but don't present it all as such, because it can't all be that way, because ultimately then the public fails to distinguish between things that are actually important or actually potentially hurtful or potentially really great, because everything's painted with the same brush. So it remains to be seen how this all goes down. Jill, as we record this, I haven't seen a social media post from Trump regarding the Mika Joe meeting. I imagine one is bubbling soon.
All right, time for the speed read from NPR. One person has died and at least 38 people have become sick following an E. coli outbreak linked to organic carrots. The carrot supplier, Grimway Farms, issued a recall for whole and baby organic carrots. So for baby carrots, they have a best if used date that ranges from September 11th to November 12th. And for whole organic carrots that were sold in stores around August 14th to October 23rd, they do not actually have best buy dates. The recall includes carrots sold at Trader Joe's, Wegmans, and Sprouts, as well as some brands at Whole Foods and Target. And there is a full list available on the FDA website.
Yeah, we'll link to it in the show notes here. Jill, my friends obviously all follow, because part of being my friend means you follow us on Mo News. And my friends Dan Roosh, Mike Zussel. Mike Zussel's on the text thread as well. We're all taking photos of the carrots they were finding in their refrigerator today, saying, Mo News told me to throw these away. Dan writes, got a bad batch. Feel like I won the lottery today, but in a bad way. So definitely go through your refrigerator to make sure you don't have these carrots.
That's so funny, because I find that a lot of the recalled stuff is not stuff that I normally have in my refrigerator. It's just like I don't even pay attention to it.
Yeah.
But there have been a couple of recalls recently that I was like, oh my God, I think I have those chicken nuggets. I may have had those carrots.
Well, especially since some of these foods that are getting recalled recently get packaged under different names at a number of grocery stores. So it's like, you're like, oh, if they just sold that at Aldi or just sold that at Traders or just sold that at then I'm okay. But they're like, no, these carrots go to all these various grocery stores out there. A reminder, E. coli infections typically start a few days after eating contaminated food with symptoms that resemble the flu here. So a reminder again, check your fridges. Getting reports of a lot of people not realizing they need to throw out their carrots. The link again is in the show notes.
All right, back to politics from the New York Times. Many Democrats have declared that they are leaving the social media site formerly known as Twitter, now known as X.
Will it ever be X?
I feel like we've been using X a little bit.
We've been using X. I feel like we're getting there. It still feels like Twitter
it's slow.
To me, but slowly I'm getting there.
So where are they going, you might be wondering? To an app called Bluesky. It is a similar social media platform that lets users control their own feeds without one company being in control of content moderation and rules. So this comes after 115,000 users deactivated their X accounts on the Wednesday after Election Day, expressing their frustration with Musk's support for Trump and also his changing of the algorithm to be very pro-Trump. He had already made changes when he first took over the platform, like cutting content moderation and allowing users to buy blue check verifications. Meanwhile, Bluesky reported a surge of 1 million new signups in a single day last Thursday. The site is now up to 20 million users, but that influx is causing some technical issues, including the site briefly going down on Thursday, as well as some other glitches.
So what do you call it if you're writing on Bluesky? We were talking about this earlier in the trial meeting. Is it skywriting? Is it bluing?
BSing. I think that was our favorite.
Or our favorite was Blue Sky BS. Are you BSing over on Bluesky? It still remains much smaller, even at 20 million users, than X, which had 611 million active users in April. It's unclear if this is the right approach here. Of course, we support a very robust and diverse social media ecosystem. But if this is a lot of Democrats and liberals cocooning themselves in their own bubble because they want to get away from X, the challenge for some Democrats as they consider, being in touch with working class voters and some of the issues that a lot of folks across the country deem important that they deemed the Democrats out of touch with, is it the right move to leave X altogether and move to your own orbit over on Bluesky? We noted some of the names last week. Don Lemon, the writer Stephen King. I think Jim Carrey left X a couple of years ago. There's a variety of Jamie Lee Curtis, the actress, Bette Midler. There's some prominent names in the past couple of years that have left X, some of whom I didn't really realize were on X or wasn't looking for their posts. Nonetheless, look for us over on Bluesky. We got to get in the game here at Mo News everywhere people are going. So there is now Mo-News over on Bluesky. If you want to follow us over there, I'll try to make a point after the Instagram and the newsletter and the podcast and the YouTube and the TikTok and the Facebook and the Snapchat of making sure I'm BSing enough for you guys over there.
The problem, as I've heard some influencers say, is that they have spent years, more than a decade building up their audience on some of these platforms, particularly Twitter.
Yeah.
And it's a hard pill to swallow to go over to Bluesky and have like 7 followers.
Like and over on Twitter, I haven't taken it that seriously, but I have I think we have 12 or 13,000 followers. Bluesky right now, as of this recording, we have 17 followers over on the
I'll follow you. As soon as we're done recording, I'll bring it to 18.
Jill, we'll see what happens with it. Threads, because of the Instagram integration, we have almost 100,000 followers on Threads. I don't thread that often. I should probably thread more. I know some people over at Meta follow this podcast. So Meta folks, I'm trying to thread. There's a lot, and we're trying to get to all of them and all the people. But Threads has been trying to make Threads happen for a while. I know there's some active users on Threads, and so we'll see what the prognosis is here for Bluesky.
It's just a different vibe on Threads. They're trying not to really promote political stuff, which is hard given that we are a news outlet.
Yeah, the de-emphasis of news. First of all, by the way, that's also how Instagram is going, right? They want to de-emphasize news, and guys, we notice the clicks sometimes and where things are going. But ultimately, people want to vibe on news, especially at times like these over the next couple of years. And so it's finding the platform where you can best do that.
And Moshe, I am going to give myself a little shout out because shortly before we recorded this podcast, I hit 10,000 followers on my personal Instagram account. When Amazing. I tell you that I was teetering on, I'm not joking, 9,999 for like hours all day on Monday. And I'm thinking, what's going on? Because I kept seeing that there were some new people who followed me, but it must have meant that obviously a few others weren't interested.
Well, and they clear out, and some of them turn out to be bots and stuff. So don't take it personally there, Jill. As the Mo News account is about 500,000 at this point.
Okay, I get it.
But we see a churn on a daily basis. Like, I was like, why did 1,000 people leave today? And how many of them were actual human beings versus like random bot accounts, etc. So,
well, if you guys want
selling me crypto, there's always these like bot accounts selling me crypto.
Well, if you guys want to follow me, it is Jill R. Wagner over at Instagram.
Let's get Jill to 11,000, everybody.
Come on, everybody. From the Wall Street Journal, a $12,000 surgery to change your eye color is growing in popularity. Meanwhile, many doctors say that it has not been proven safe and could cause lasting damage. The procedure is not covered by insurance. It takes about a half hour. The results, though, are immediate, and it has become known as corneal tattooing. There are very few ophthalmologists who will actually do this procedure, but one doctor who does, a Russian immigrant who opened a clinic in Manhattan, says he is on track to treat 400 people this year.
Jill, I imagine there's a lot of people like us with brown eyes who are, hoping to be blue-eyed people. I don't know how many blue-eyed people go to brown. It's usually going for lighter eye color. Apparently the way the surgery works is they cut tunnels into the corneas.
I can't.
All right.
Can you just, I'm not listening to the rest of this story.
All right. So we're not going, basically they dye your eye. I won't get into the details. Sorry for those of you who are cringing with Jill there. As you said, it's called corneal tattooing or keratopigmentation. And the effect is immediate and not reversible. So choose wisely.
You better pick the right color.
If you trust this guy, and of course there is potential side effect here. You could get a debilitating glare caused by iris or corneal damage. And apparently this procedure was around for a while as a medical procedure for people who are having issues. And now they're trying to use it for cosmetic purposes. The American Academy of Ophthalmology has warned patients that there are serious risks for vision loss if you do this. The safer way to lighten the appearance of your eyes, contact lenses. Try those before you go with the procedure Jill wouldn't let me talk about.
I can't. So given that I can't even hear about it, you could tell that I'm not going to
Jill's not
subject myself to
checking out this guy in Manhattan to change her brown eyes.
I'm still clinging to Van Morrison's Brown-Eyed Girl.
Yeah,
and
there's a song
it's
about
all
you.
Good. It's all good.
There's a song about you. Don't mess with it.
And in other medical news from the New York Times, a small study found that ChatGPT outdid human physicians when it came to diagnosing illnesses. The study tested whether doctors had better results when they acted alone or with the aid of ChatGPT-4. It turns out there wasn't much of a difference. The study tested whether doctors had better results when they acted alone or with the aid of ChatGPT-4. It turns out there wasn't much of a difference when the doctors worked by themselves or with ChatGPT-4. Believe it or not, the difference was that ChatGPT alone, as in without any help from the doctors, outperformed both of those doctor groups.
Yeah, so the way they scored it, ChatGPT got an average of 90% in diagnosing a medical condition, and doctors without ChatGPT got a 74%. In diagnosing a medical condition. So fascinating here in terms of the implication here. But we should note this was a very small study, 50 doctors, and they were given 6 case histories and graded on their ability to suggest diagnoses and explain why. But just huge implications here. I mean, we often talk about the potential downside here of AI or concerns about AI, but as a force multiplier, as a way to help folks in a variety of professions, including in medicine, a lot of potential here.
And finally, from the Infatuation, the popular food rating website just released its best new restaurants list of 2024. The top spots include a French restaurant in Philadelphia called Provenance. In Chicago, a Mexican seafood spot called Mariscos San Pedro. Then there's a barbecue joint in Austin, Leroy and Lewis Barbecue. And in New York City, Moshe, apparently we've got to get ourselves a table at Penny, a seafood spot in the East Village.
Remember the good old days, like going out in the East Village?
No, it's been that long.
Jill has wiped that from her memory, or had too many drinks at the East Village bars to remember what happened back in the day.
I think I was there, allegedly.
So Infatuation here, in addition to their listings, also looks at dining trends for next year. Among the trends they have noted in 2025, a fresh new take on the American diner experience. The old school diner, not so much. The new trendy diner, apparently in. There's a place called Toasty Badger in Austin that serves biscuits and gravy made with tomato jam. Then you have Kellogg's Diner in New York City, where there are nachos, skate wing, almondine, eggs, and waffles. Atlanta's newest lunch counter is called Pure Quill Superette. Then another trend they're looking at is wine bars that also happen to serve great food. You know, frustration if you go to a wine bar, they might have great wine selection, but there's always like peanuts and like a handful of snacks on the menu. Well, wine bars, it's becoming trendy to actually have a good menu. There's a place called Claude in New York, a place Bar Jabroni in San Francisco, and then in LA, they have a couple options. Sam's Place and Stir Crazy are suggested here by Infatuation. And apparently one more thing, we're moving on from the Smash Burger, which was a huge hit. By the way, there's some cities that are still awaiting their smash burger. But the trend for 2025, thicker, meatier burgers. In Austin, it's a place called Odd Duck. In LA, the Benjamin and Dunsmore are two options. And then in Miami, Eden Bistro and Shadow Wagyu are two of the options they suggest. Again, all available right now over on the Infatuation website.
Moshe, another trend that we discussed here on the podcast last week for what we were watching, reading, and eating, I said I was going to pop up bagel. That is a trend, the idea of ripping and dipping bagels instead of having them cut in half and have all the toppings in the middle. Yeah, they've been doing that. Is it Detroit that eats their bagels that way too? I know that's pretty controversial. They cite Mount Bagel in Seattle, Laundromat in San Francisco, and Wake and Late in Los Angeles. Sorry, Jill, I got my Midwest cities wrong. It's St. Louis. St. Louis cuts its bagels like you would cut a loaf of bread. Controversial for the New really? Yeah, if you Google St. Louis bagel, that is like the trend in St. Louis is like they've been all about slicing the bagel in a like a loaf of bread for years apparently. I would say that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I feel like the bagel has pretty much been perfected for centuries now, but I am not against the rip and dip. Jill, I could do a whole history of the bagel for you. Do it. Long story short, the theory goes as about 1,000 years ago, the king of Poland in Eastern Europe banned Jews from being able to bake bread. So that led Jews to have to boil their bread. Hence the bagel. It eventually makes its way with the whole Eastern European immigration push in the 19th century to New York, which is one of the reasons New York is associated with the bagel. But ultimately, that is one of the origin stories of the bagel. Moshe, you never let me down. Really. For anyone who says you don't learn something on this podcast. St. Louis bagels, Jews banned from baking bread back, hundreds of years ago in Europe. We got something for you every day. Where we also have something for you is in the On This Day in History segment. On This Day in History, on November 19th, 1863, the famous Gettysburg Address was delivered by Abraham Lincoln. One of the shortest but most famous speeches in U.S. presidential history, 275 words. You might remember 77 years ago, it was the speech that helped motivate the North to continue the war and eventually defeat the South in the Civil War. Ends with this notable quote: "We hear highly resolved that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth." We fast forward here to the 20th century, slightly different piece of history. The first Applebee's opened on this day in Decatur, Georgia. Officially named, Jill, the first Applebee's was a long name. TJ Applebee's RX for edibles and elixirs was the first name of Applebee's, then shortened to just Applebee's. Good job.
And your clue at the beginning, on this day in 2007, Amazon.com began selling the Kindle, a wireless electronic reading device that played a key role in popularizing ebooks. If you heard the ad break in the middle of this podcast, we have a new partnership here with Amazon Audible to have access to hundreds of thousands of ebooks, podcasts, a whole variety of exclusive content. So definitely check out that special deal over at mo.news/audible. Though, Joel, you and I have discussed, we're both sort of old school, hard book readers, me and you. Dabbled in the ebooks, but we still like the book in our hands. I
like a physical book, but I will say this is the first year within the past few months that I have started to listen to ebooks, especially if it's in preparation of an interview or something like that. But for real enjoyment, I just like a physical book. I can't help it.
But if you're interested in checking it out, there's a special deal again over at mo.news/audible, and you'll get some credits there to download books over the next couple of months.
It is more convenient.
Oh, it's like 1,000,000% more convenient. Especially if you try, like me, to travel with no checked luggage, to only go carry on. Books can take up some space.
Or you're like me and still prefer a hardcover book. Brutal. It's like they don't fit in a pocketbook.
Chill at the beach, the sand's getting in the book. It's a whole thing. All right, we end here with a bit of pop culture history. On this day in 1975, classic film One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, starring Jack Nicholson, premiered in theaters. On this day 49 years ago. On this day in 1992, 32 years ago today, Nothing But a G Thing by Dr. Dre, featuring Snoop Dogg, was released.
And who would have thought all of these years later, Snoop Dogg and Martha Stewart would be besties and have a TV show?
And Dr. Dre has his name on buildings, and all these guys have become 100 millionaires, billionaires based on their business prowess. And Snoop Dogg is doing equestrian commentary at the Olympics. But still, nothing but a G thing, Jill. That's where they got started.
All right, that's a wrap. Thank you for listening to the Mo News podcast. If you like what you hear, share this with your friends. It will help us grow. Follow us and subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and review us in the App Store.
1, 2, 3, and to the foe. Leave us a review in the App Store. Death Row is the label that doesn't pay us, so we need your support.
Yes, please.